Theorist Slavoj Žižek.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a little bit about what attracts you to Žižek and what ideas you
I just
draw?
think he's perverted, you know? He's like, he's just like, and he just talks constantly. And it's like, he's just like seeping and talking. He's like sweaty and spitting and touching himself. I'm like, what is, I just find it so fascinating the way in which he engages these ideas. It's as if they are, you know, made manifest in like liquid form on his body or something. And you know, and you know, he has some interesting things to say. So he's, you know, I think of him as a kind of public intellectual in a way that, you know, lots of theorists aren't. And that really appeals to me, to kind of enter the world as this kind of, you know, intellectual figure who has something to say about almost everything. Instead of like, you know, remaining in the kind of lockbox of the university, which is nowhere really. So I think, yeah, he just appeals to me that way. He's like, you know, he's like a beautiful slug.
You teach at the University of Pittsburgh. Do you struggle with kind of like inside outside with the university? And I mean, you said life in a
Mm,
box is a pretty life, and
mhm.
now we're talking about this nowhere of the academy. I'm just
Mm.
wondering if you're sort of struggling with feeling.
I mean, these days it doesn't feel as much like a struggle. Like the university, you know, I can kind of, you know, I feel it for what it is, but it's a choice. You can choose to remain in the university, or you know, this kind of sacred space, or you can leave that space and do other things, right? So, I mean, I think at some point I decided, I mean, I've always had like these dual lives where, you know, one part like activist, social justice worker, you know, then being in the university, and those two things really, you know, kind of trying to reconcile their coexistence, and then just at some point like accepting that they didn't need to be reconciled, they just are. Like I do this over here, I do this over here, and I do this over here. I mean, I think it's important to um, kind of take the intellectual and creative realm at its highest level into the world and outside of the university. So you know, so I just, for instance, taught a class at the Poetry Project. But I taught that class as though, you know, just anyone could sign up for it. I had really great students. Um, but some of them may not have had a graduate school education. But I taught that class like I would teach like any class of really smart people, because I think it's important to kind of, you know, have the same level of conversations that you would have like in the world, in the world outside of the university, as you would in, you know, all these sacred spaces like the museum, the university, whatever.
You're involved in another collective, the Black
Mm-hmm.
Took Collective. What is it that attracts you to working in collectives or working collaboratively?
Hmm. You know, I don't like the idea of the writer kind of, you know, locked in a seclusion, just, you know, in one's own mind all the time. I think that, I mean, I think of myself as, you know, a writer who has other artistic interests. So, you know, in collaboration is where I find lots of energy for, especially as like collaboration is a really, I think, can be an uncomfortable process, like working with another person and having to deal with them. But I think it's like, there's a kind of productive discomfort in that, you know, there are moments when I find myself like in the collective that you're talking about, the Black Took collectives, the Black Took collective, I'll find myself on stage. I'm not like a person who is a natural performer. So, you know, doing things that I never thought I would do and being entirely uncomfortable initially with this prospect. And then on the other side, kind of discovering something about both language and performance that I didn't know I would discover. So I think, you know, collaboration can be really important in that way, at least for me.
Where does the name come from? Black
Black
Tuck.
Took. Um, it's from Gertrude Stein. From Gertrude Stein, a line from Tender Buttons. And the line is, "It was black, comma black took," um, which seems appropriate. I mean, the collective does a lot of work around, you know, there's a kind of satirical investigation of race and gender. And, Gertrude Stein can be, some think of as a controversial figure when it comes to the way that she represented raced bodies. So, talking about intertextuality, there's a kind of interesting satirical or slippery kind of intertextuality going on there in this conversation about race.
In the interview with the Denver Quarterly, you said that disillusionment was part of the founding of the group. Do you remember what you were thinking of there in terms of like what you were disillusioned with? Or
I don't know if I should tell you. This is, I mean, disillusionment in a kind of, I think I say in that interview too that Black Took Collective was born out of Cave Canem. I mean, that's where we met. So I met Ronaldo Wilson at Cave Canem, and Duriel came the next year. I mean, I think the disillusionment was just about kind of like, in reaction against, is probably what I would say now. It was born as a kind of reaction against a kind of, radical adherence to tradition and kind of thinking about what Black tradition is. And, that I think felt oppressive, and not Cave Canem as an institution, but I think that this is a thing that is a question in Black poetics, if there is such a thing, right? Like where, what is the role of kind of like a radical adherence to tradition, and, how do you tell those stories perhaps on the other side in a way that is more contemporary or more cosmopolitan, or, kind of different from the ways that the stories have been told before? What are the other stories that aren't told? I mean, I think that, that satire is a kind of way of approaching the same stories without them feeling, without the kind of, anything that's hackneyed. Because there's always that moment, there's always that space or that gap in satire, where there's the question where, the kind of unanswered question where you have to kind of think, well, what's going on here? Am I supposed to be laughing? Or am I supposed to, is it serious? How is this person approaching this subject? So that really appeals to me, and that's, kind of at the heart of the work of Black Took Collective. So, born out of, also just general rebelliousness. I think we were, rebellious younger people. So we were just like, let's start some trouble.
Do you find that there's tension for you as a Black experimental poet, a sense that being an experimental poet could be considered a betrayal?
No, I don't feel that. I mean, I feel as if some people might say something like that, but if they did, I would certainly have an answer for them.
What would that answer be?
It's ridiculous. There's no betrayal to what? Betray, like, or to whom? Right? That, there is a long Black experimental kind of, I could chart a trajectory of Black experimental writers in this country. Depending on how you define experimental. But I think you need new ideas for new times. You need new forms. As Erica Hunt says, when, this is kind of a paraphrase, but, when you need old languages actually produce old ideas. So you need radical innovation in order to think differently. I mean, I think it's necessary. Not that there's, I'm not saying that, that experimental poets are better than whatever is on the other side of that. But I think innovation in every single art form is necessary in order for us to be able to imagine something else.